This is always known as the Anderson House, perhaps because Henry Anderson had his post office here for a long, long time, and that started in 1907. Now, Henry Anderson was one of 9 children of Ed Anderson. Ed Anderson built the Methodist 1906 church. And so one could conjecture that he was a good builder. In fact, when you look at the various buildings throughout the area that were built by the Métis, it's evident that they knew their building structures very well. They built very well. Now, this is built on the Métis style, as many people refer to it, the Red River style of log building, and that involves the notched corners of the logs fitted very snugly together, and that is the way the kitchen addition is built onto the clerk's quarters at Victoria Settlement. Now, something that this house had that was unusual was that it was shingle clad. Now, that one might think would be probably an insulation, an additional insulation, but I'd be more inclined to think it was for aesthetic purposes. It gave a real beauty, and as you look at its structure here, you can well conjecture that the family were becoming well established to be able to build a house like that. You know, this house is certainly more sophisticated than the McGilvery house, but it was built around the turn of the century. Henry Anderson was the owner. I have a summary of ownership here. In 1917, he sold to the Spurgeon Van Idestein family. They moved into this house. This is River Lot 14, and lived here till 1926. Earl Van Idestein was born here. So this was his home. In 1926, Jack Ference bought it and moved his family here, and they lived here until 1948. The Anderson children, the Van Idestein children, the Ference children all attended Lopstick School. The Anderson children attended Lopstick School when it was on River Lot 8, just along the trail to the west. Jack Ference sold the land to Sam and Taras Harouk, 2 bachelor brothers, and they lived here. They were nephews, I believe, of people at the next farm, and so they farmed together. In 1974, Bud Van Idestein, a grandson of Spurgeon, bought the land again into the family from the Harouk brothers. And in 1986, he sold it to Brent Fletcher, and Brent is the present owner of this place now. The logs, in the interior, the logs were chinked more heavily than on the outside, and then there was this cover of mud and probably sand and concrete, things like that, to give it a good smooth finish. And typical to houses of the time, there would be the large entry space that was the kitchen, and the other room served every other purpose, you know, living room, bedrooms, sitting room. This house had the advantage of the stairwell there and bedrooms upstairs. Now, also in the northern area, and we'd never dare to go upstairs because of the frailty of this building, the north wing was a storage space. And the Ference family said it was their storage space. The Van Idestein family said it was their storage space. And then I had read someplace that in all these houses, their storage spaces were upstairs because they were drier. You know, today we have cellars, basements for all the storage. Then their perishables like flour were stored upstairs. Their potatoes, their root vegetables, went into the cellar downstairs. You can imagine that this house was very comfortable in its day. All the walls upstairs. It's leaking, you see, and the mud. Let's go from the wood.
Well, that's true, but the difference in warmth between the British house and this house was caused by the mud.
Of course, a world of difference. Yes, just the wood houses that had it finished just like that, and sometimes people papered them because they couldn't get that V-joint, as you call that, because that was a fine building material. Those houses were as cold as tin. These houses were warm. Houses that were chinked alone, just the log and chinking alone meant warmth. But when it got this additional coat, it was comfort. Now, whether that was original is a good question, because it's not the wide wood that you have, say, in the McGilvery house or the Kirk's quarters. It is a different wood. And there was some question raised that this may have been built by the Whitfords, but when you look at the structure, at the interior, and you look at the ceiling, then you know it was not of that vintage. The cellar too is a real deep excavation, enclosed with heavy logs. So it was a really good, sound storage space for all their vegetable produce, the root vegetables. Many of the early houses had a 9-foot ceiling, and this doesn't.
Yeah.
Lower. But it's a real pity that this house is going to drop. This house, they say, is very typical of a May house. On the other hand, the Ukrainian house, the one that I said had all the trimmings, was sort of an elitist house of its time for that culture group. That house is very typical of a Ukrainian house. You know, its positioning due east-west, facing due south, its central foyer, the rooms on either side, windows as they were placed, all is very typical of Ukrainian structures, and that is what they were quite excited about. You see, the one style that the clerk's quarters is built on is post en sill, and that is, the advantage of that is you can use shorter logs, because you could put the main pillar there and there, maybe the size of the room, and lay the other logs into the grooves into it. Now this takes longer logs, better logs, because they have to be longer, you know, places like that, structures that are very strong, and the corners have to be notched together to fit perfectly. But the Red River style is a general term they use, and or the Métis. The Ukrainian had theirs, the Métis had theirs, subsequent people had theirs, the British people had theirs. Theirs were, the British people didn't have this, you know, they probably used paper over wood, over boards. Which was cold and uncomfortable in the wintertime. But the Ukrainian people came from a climate that was very similar to this. And so they were, in that respect, quite prepared for this country. In fact, jubilant, because they had the wood to build with, plenty of wood for firewood, and that is what made them happy. I read a story of a family by the name of Zaharachuk, very early settlers. They came through Fort Victoria, and when they came there and looked about, the head of the household, the man, said, "I should never have done this. Why did I bring my family here?" And so he went off to work, and he said to his wife and child, he said, "I'm going off to work, and as soon as I earn enough money, I'll come back home, and I'm taking you right back home." So he did that. He built a little shelter of pine boughs, just a crude little structure, and he went off to work. When he came in the fall, his wife was all prepared for the winter time. And she said to him, "I'm not going. I'm staying here," she said. "Look at the forest, to build with, to burn, to keep us warm." She said, "The woods have mushrooms and berries, and the woods are filled with rabbits and birds." She said, "We'll never go hungry. We will stay." It's a wonderful story of not only of endurance, but of optimism. Yeah. I enjoyed that. The evolution of time makes such a difference. It was just a narrow road with a canopy of branches above. A narrow road. That's what time does. And that is what the historians feared is, time is going to erode this entirely. Designation may retain it. We want the landscape to be a part of the history. Yep. It speaks the history. That speaks history. Take that down and put a plaque. It might tell a story, but a very inadequate piece of history.
That was recorded in 2002, but by 2010, the building was being preserved. Christine and Brent Fletcher donated the house and 1/3 of an acre to the Smoky Lake Heritage Sports Society. Chair Noreen Easterbrook hired a company to lift the house. Robert and Ken Van Eiderstein, Don Clem, Noreen Easterbrook, and Andrew Pelva have worked hard over a long period of time to save the building. A new footing was poured, and concrete walls set for a new foundation. And volunteers helped with the pour. Logs were trimmed square at a mill in St. Michael to replace the missing and rotted ones. The 20-foot logs were dovetail cut at the ends and fit together like a puzzle. The house was lifted back on its original foundation, and now is time for shingling, not just the roof, but the walls. The work was endless. In 2014, Andrew Pluva was hired to build new windows, doors, and put in new joists. There's still lots of work to be done. Next phase is plastering and painting. But the house in the middle of the road, as it's called, the local landmark on the Victoria District National Historic Site, is well on its way to being saved. Thank you.